Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this September 22nd, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Footage has emerged showing the moment an intruder ran across the lawn toward the White House in Washington, sparking a partial building evacuation. The intruder was seen shortly after President Barack Obama left the building on Friday night. Witnesses said they saw a man jump the fence and run towards the north portico. This video was filmed by cameraman Dennis Gaffney and showed what appears to be the man running towards the building. That's our opening story for tonight, friends, and a very important story comes out of France from our brother Ruben. You know, on last night we showed you video of in a video from Paris on our program last night. Hugh Schofield reported on French fighter jets having launched their first airstrikes against Islamic State in northern Iraq, and how that action followed President Hollande's public promise to join the American-led effort to confront the jihadists who have taken over a swath of Iraqi territory. In reaction to the actions and intentions of Brother Ruben, a French man has been kidnapped in Algeria by a militant group linked to Islamic State, IS, according to the French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius.
Confirme malheureusement l'authenticité de la vidéo.
The Foreign Ministry has just issued a statement confirming, sadly, the authenticity of the video that carries pictures of Herve Gourdel taken hostage in Algeria on Sunday in the Tizuzu region. The threats from this terrorist group are extremely serious and are testimony once more of the extreme cruelty of this movement that we call Islamic State and of all who support it. I spoke with the Algerian Foreign Minister. The French President has met with the Algerian Prime Minister. Everything is being done in close cooperation with the Algerian authorities to obtain the release of our compatriot, but we must not hide the fact that the situation is extremely critical.
And friends, I have some pictures here, some photos that'll show this region, this area. In the upper left corner is a map of the area. To the right of that is a photo showing the Kabylie region, which is a rugged and mountainous area of Algeria. And then the picture down at the bottom shows journalists gathered outside Mr. Gourdel's home in southern France tonight. This is the map showing the rugged terrain there. The apparent kidnappers threatened to kill Mr. Gourdel unless France ended its military operation. In the video, Mr. Gourdel identified himself as a 55-year-old from Nice, southern France. Speaking apparently under duress, he said, "This armed group is asking me to ask your French President, François Hollande, to not intervene in Iraq." The French newspaper Le Monde described Mr. Gourdel as a mountain guide and a photographer in Algeria as a tourist. There's the picture outside his home. Here's the picture of the map. The Algeria Interior Ministry said he and two Algerian companions had been driving through the mountains near the village of near a village there. Oops, I went the wrong way. I want to go back to that photo of that mountain area. He was driving through a mountainous village when they were stopped by armed men. The gunmen let the Algerians go, but they seized the Frenchmen, and again, that's in an effort to try to persuade the French president to stop their airstrikes, not join the American-led airstrikes in Iraq. Okay, that picture that popped up on the screen a little prematurely here with Blair. Tony Blair is saying in this interview that boots on the ground are needed to defeat the IS militants.
A group like ISIS, as you can see, they are brutal, they kill without mercy, and they're prepared to die without regret. That makes them a fanatical force that you can contain, possibly, by air power. You can harry and hem them in by air power, but in the end you are also going to have force capability on the ground. Now, I'm not saying we in the West need to do this. It would be better if it were done by those people closer to the ground who've got the most immediate and direct interest in fighting them. But I don't think we can in all circumstances rule it out, and after all, we do have the force capability to do this.
Barack Obama has ruled out any possibility of ground troops, so too has David Cameron. You're saying they're wrong?
No, I think the president is doing exactly the right thing. I think he's built a big alliance of countries. I mean, he and John Kerry have put together some 50 countries in this. I think strategy is evolving. No one, by the way, and this is what President Obama specifically has ruled out, no one is wanting to see armies back in their occupying territory. It's not necessary and probably not wise to do that. But there may be situations, already there's enormous help being given to those on the ground through intelligence, through military training, through helping arm them, helping support them in all sorts of different ways. I think as policy evolves, there may, and I only say may, there may be a role also for some force capability. And
just to be clear, that for you means boots on the ground?
Well, it means someone's boots on the ground for sure. Now, that can be the local fighters. So Iraqi forces, the Kurdish forces, they are people who may be able to do this. So that's why I'm not saying necessarily in this situation it has to be the US or the UK. But what I am saying is if you look at the responses that we have, we're already giving significant help on the ground. We're already conducting airstrikes. This is the broad alliance of nations. You know, if necessary, we shouldn't rule out, as this evolves, and if it's necessary, rule out the use of some particularly special force capabilities. My point, though, is very simple. All of our experience teaches us that unless you're prepared to fight these people on the ground, you're not going. You may contain them, but you won't defeat them.
Friends, that was the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair speaking with BBC's Nick Bryant. In our next story, we're going to the BBC's Sydney correspondent John Donaldson, who spoke to Rico Hizon about the meeting that's coming up, or let me get my notes, the G20 group meeting of wealthy nations, which is close to agreeing to a package of initiatives to boost global growth. Here's the report on that.
If you could sum up these meetings this weekend, you'd say they think things are going pretty well, but they're worried about the Eurozone. So Joe Hockey, the treasurer here, said that they were 90% towards meeting this target of $2 trillion worth of growth, 2% growth by 2018, but they're worried a little bit about Europe. That will, of course, mean a big increase in the number of jobs globally. But I guess the question is, 2 years down the road, will these targets have been met? And what Joe Hockey's saying is that he wants this growth to be driven by investment in infrastructure. Australia on its own is pledging to invest $125 billion in infrastructure projects in Australia in the coming years. So overall, I think you'd say that they're pretty satisfied. You mentioned, of course, this is the precursor to the G20, which takes place in November. I think one of the interesting things is, while the Australian agenda is very much about economic growth, we could see things distracted a bit by bigger issues. One thing that came out of this meeting is that the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, will be invited to the G20, despite some controversy about the situation in Ukraine. And I think that could prove a distraction for the meeting in November.
And one of the key topics in the discussion over the weekend were tax goals. Joe Hockey says they've agreed to far-reaching initiatives to identify tax evaders. When will this be kicking in, John, and how will it work?
Well, basically what they're agreeing to do is to be more transparent about sharing information about who pays tax where. A lot of these big global companies have all sorts of tricks up their sleeve to maybe do a lot of their business in one place but end up paying tax in a different country. So what they're saying is that they've got this new system called SIRS, which will allow the sharing of information between countries. I think it's going to be interesting to see whether the accountants end up being one step ahead of the politicians.
Okay, an interesting point he made there. They're going to get their taxes, and they work together to do it. So far in that G20 meeting, they've come up with 1,000 policies, and that'll eventually wind up helping put together the beast power into a federated United States of Europe. That's where all this is leading. As we watch this together, you'll see that's where all this is going. Now, in Hong Kong, thousands of students have converged on a university campus to begin a week-long boycott of classes. They are protesting against China's stance on electoral reform in the territory, and pupils from more than 24 institutions are taking part. The BBC's Carrie Gracie met some of those who had taken to the streets, who told her they would fight for democracy, even if Beijing did not want to listen. Friends, the point that's going to really, you should get out of this story is, when is mankind going to learn that even democracy's not a perfect form of government? And in the 6,000 years of man being on this earth, how many times and how well is he going to write the lesson that man without Jesus Christ cannot govern himself? But here's the reporter with Carrie Gracie with those students in Hong Kong.
When Hong Kong returned to China in 1997, Beijing promised that it would respect its way of life, and that meant the right to protest along with other freedoms. They also promised that by 2017, Hong Kong would get direct elections for its leadership. And the trouble is that 3 weeks ago, Beijing announced the rules for those elections, and they don't like them. There's going to be a committee which will produce just 2 or 3 candidates, and they fear that means only the candidates Beijing likes will get through. So what do they hope this protest will achieve?
We are here to fight for our democracy and to ask the government to give the democracy that they promised.
I want my voice to be heard. I want voices of people who hold the same opinion as I do to be heard, and that is that we want a true democracy. We want genuine universal suffrage for Hong Kong.
And do you think this protest will change Beijing's mind?
I'm not sure, but I think that we have to do something to fight for it. At least we do something first.
Campaigners say this student strike is just a beginning, that there's a wider campaign of civil disobedience coming. But Beijing says it's not listening. They say Western-style democracy would be bad for Hong Kong, create chaos, and that these protests are being stirred up by foreign governments who are determined not just to undermine the stability and prosperity of Hong Kong, but who are trying to subvert China through this.
Well, friends, if I could share with them one of the statements that our Western civilization instructor at Ambassador College in my 3rd year, I took that during my junior year, would say to us almost every day in that class, in Western civilization class, he would say, democracy is the only form of government that has within itself its own seed of destruction. Now, I used to wonder, what does that mean? And you know, you could go to your instructors. We had a high number of instructors ratio to students, and you could easily get to your instructor, ask him questions, and I'd ask him, you know, well, what do you mean by that? Just exactly what do you mean by that? He would tell me, you will see in the future, in your lifetime, you'll see what I'm saying. And, you know, friends, it took me a long time and a lot of prayers, too. But I think we're all seeing just that now, that, you know, democracy really doesn't work. Here in our own country, the United States, where I am, we have presidents that barely get elected, you know, because the vote, instead of being, you know, a whopping 80% to 20% or 90% to 10% or something like that, it's often 51 to 49. You know, real neck and neck close, and on many issues, we're showing that our house is divided. And in the past used to, where it seemed that when one party won the election, everybody got behind whoever it was. Now it seems everybody seems to hold their party, and even the one in power would defer to the other party if they had the upper hand, and just to keep peace and make things work. Now a lot of friction, and we're going to see this work even less and less. And these countries that are wanting to go democratic, they're going to probably discover what we're going to be seeing more and more in the United States, that just like Mr. William Schultz, Ambassador College instructor of Western civilization during the years I was there in college, as he says, democracy is the only form of government that has within itself its own seed of destruction. On this story in Hong Kong, friends, we've got an update. The BBC's Juliana Liu has more details.
The beginning of the boycott. Thousands of students have gathered at the Chinese University of Hong Kong to take part in a week-long strike.
Students from more than 24 universities and vocational schools are here. They say it's much more than just skipping classes. They've organized a series of rallies and public lectures on the future of democracy in Hong Kong.
Their main goal is to put pressure on the Chinese and Hong Kong governments to loosen restrictions on who can run for the position of chief executive in 3 years. The Chinese government outlined those rules at the end of August. Everyone in Hong Kong will be able to vote, but the candidate must be approved by more than half of a nominating body that is expected to be filled with Beijing loyalists. Only 2 or 3 candidates will be allowed.
I believe when China's made their decision, it crushed the dreams of some Hong Kong people who have been fighting hard for democracy for the past 30 years.
But not all are convinced the boycott will work.
I think it will achieve very little, maybe close to nothing. I think after the Chinese government made its decision, it will not be affected by Hong Kong's decision.
The city is deeply divided between those who want greater democracy and those who do not wish to antagonize the Chinese government. Some believe having any kind of say at the ballot box is better than having no say at all. The striking students don't agree. Many support a civil disobedience campaign called Occupy Central, which plans to stage a sit-in in the Central Business District as early as October, after the week-long strike ends.
Okay, friends, and that story ended a little bit faster than I thought it would. If some of you are wondering why the pale green horse on the screen and sometimes different colored horses, let me put a chart up here for you that explains that and bring it out close up. You'll see the first 4 columns of this chart have 4 colors, and at the top of them 4 little horses in kind of a riding, kicking up stance, and they represent the first 4 seals of Revelation, which are depicted as 4 4 horses and 4 horsemen, with the first seal being a white horse representing false religion, deception, religious deception, false Christ, Antichrist. The second seal depicted by a red horse, which Jesus Christ described in plain language and through the gospel writers Matthew, Mark, and Luke, in Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13, describing this one, the second seal, the red horse, as war, rumors of war and world war. And the third seal depicted in Revelation by a black horse, which Jesus Christ described in plain language in those Gospels I just mentioned, as scarcity of food, famine. And then the fourth seal, the fourth column, represented by a pale green horse, with a rider whose name is Death, alongside whom rides Hades, hell, the grave. And Jesus Christ described the activities, the actualities of this horse and its rider, this horseman, as primarily loimos, meaning disease epidemics, pestilences, the plagues of Egypt. And Christ also described 2 other activities that would occur between the third seal and the fifth seal, that being the second one being seismus, commotions in the air, commotions on the ground, such as gale force winds of all kind, and earthquakes and tsunamis and volcanic eruptions and floods and wildfires and any kind of atmospheric or seismic commotion. And Christ also described another activity between the third and fifth seal as terake, meaning disturbances, troubled waters, both literally and figuratively, mobs, seditions, trouble, just plain trouble. But not your mega trouble, not the great tribulation trouble of the fifth seal, which is the next seal, the next major event to happen in prophecy. All the other seals, the first 4 seals, these first 4 horsemen, they are active and operative right now, big time. We're seeing those in the news every day. The fifth seal, though, is yet to open up, yet to happen. That'll be the time of the revival of the Holy Roman Empire. It'll be the time of the crowning of the 7th and final head of the Holy Roman Empire. The Pope will hold a big coronation ceremony, just as the popes of the past have done, in the Emperor's Hall in Frankfurt, Germany. And when this 7th and final head is installed, crowned, that'll be the beginning of the fifth seal. The Great Tribulation. Will see a great martyrdom of God's saints. We'll see the revival of World War, round 3 of World War. We'll see the time that Christ calls the time of Jacob's trouble, a time so bad, as Christ says in Matthew chapter 24 and verses 20 through 22. He says, it's a time of trouble so bad that nothing has been this bad since the beginning of the world, no, nor ever will be. So nothing in the future will ever be as bad as what's coming, and nothing's ever been, in the past, been as bad as what's coming in the Great Tribulation, next major event in world prophecy. And on that seal related to, the fourth seal related to the pale horse and disturbances and trouble, in the news today there's a black bear. A black bear like this one in Wyoming are populous in New Jersey forest. A New Jersey University student was killed after being mauled by a black bear while hiking in what officials call an extremely rare attack. Now again, the bear in this picture, friends, comes from Wyoming. This is a picture of a bear in Wyoming, but this university student was killed in New Jersey. Darsh Patel, 22 years old, and 4 friends encountered the bear yesterday inside of the Abshawa Preserve, about 40 miles northwest of New York City. It's, for those of you in Europe, that's about 64 kilometers northwest of New York City. The bear was circling Patel when officials found the student's body. Police killed the bear at the scene. As many as 2,400 bears live in the forest of northern New Jersey. And I believe I have a map of, yeah, I do, the map here of New Jersey. The state has one of the highest black bear densities in the nation, but no human has been killed by a bear since 1852. The Reuters news agency provides that statistic for us, friends. Any bear attacks on humans are unusual, experts say. It's definitely rare, said Lawrence Hajna, the state's Environmental Protection Department spokesman. Patel and his friends were hiking in the preserve yesterday when they saw the bear following them. The group split up, but when they regrouped, Patel was missing and was later found by the police, as we said, having been all mauled and killed by that bear. Friends, on our last story for tonight, Afghan, before I tell you what happened, let me share a couple of scriptures with you. If we go to 1 Timothy chapter 2, first 3 verses, where it says, I exhort, therefore, that first of all, supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men. Now, that's something God instructs us to do in that first verse. And then in the second verse, he goes on and says, make your prayers for kings and for all that are in authority. And do this for a good reason, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all goodness and honesty. And then summing that up, verse 3, for this is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior. So we're encouraged to pray for those in authority, and there's a new Afghan president who says he will not tolerate corruption. Newly elected Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has said people in Afghanistan demonstrated a remarkable will for wanting transformation during this election. After months of wrangling over allegations of electoral fraud, Mr. Ghani was declared yesterday as the winner of Afghanistan's presidential election. In an exclusive interview with the BBC's World Affairs editor John Simpson, Mr. Ghani set out his vision for Afghanistan and acknowledged he was taking on a difficult job. So friends, we can pray for him, because you'll hear he's wanting to do good, and as much as he can do good there, it can affect us in this country and other people around the world and give us peace for a time. This can be good. So take note of Mr. Ghani and do put up some prayers for him tonight and in the days ahead. Make note of his name and maybe keep a list of all the leaders around the world. Make that a part of your prayer. If you're wondering what to pray about, pray for these. Take your list out and pray over these leaders. In this interview, you'll hear how he says he will crack down on corruption and sack ministers where necessary. I am not corrupt, you're going to hear him say, and I am not going to encourage corruption, tolerate it, or become the instrument of it, he added. Here's Mr. Ghani in this video report.
The job is attractive precisely because it looks impossible. It is a very difficult set of challenges, but the people of this country, during this election, demonstrated a remarkable will for wanting transformation.
So you don't regard this as mission impossible?
No, I don't. A lot of things that worked against us in the last 200 years now can work for us. For instance, take our location. Asia is going to become the largest continental economy in the world. And Afghanistan is right at the heart of it. We have an opportunity to change things. With climate change, our water becomes more valuable than the oil of our neighbors. We are the headwater for the region. Our mineral wealth. We are one of the wealthiest countries in terms particularly of the rare earth. Out of the 17 rare earth material, we have 14. We will be in a position to determine the future of lithium market globally. We have sufficient gold to become a really significant global player. We will become the largest producer of iron and copper in the world. But our most significant asset is the entrepreneurial energies of our people. If you go to our streets, you don't find beggars, but you find people transacting business in others. At the individual level, we're like the Chinese and the Americans. But institutionally, we have not created the market. A functioning market is one of our most significant objectives.
And you have a huge corruption problem. I mean,
Exactly.
you're the third most corrupt country on earth.
I think in terms of corruption, we can change our place at least 100 points in Transparency International's index.
In your presidency?
Yes, it's possible. Procurement, one of those most boring subjects, contracting. I will be, for the first time probably in any country's history, create a national procurement board that I will chair myself.
So this is buying all sorts of things
It's
from
buying,
the outside.
buying all sorts of things. You have to really focus. For instance, a weekly meeting, 2 hours, well prepared on procurement of large projects will save this country hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay, friends, there's a little bit of the interview, the exclusive interview with the new Afghan president. We're watching, we're going just a little bit over my usual half-hour time tonight. Friends, I want you to see something related to China. Because we're watching China, the Asian world is going to be where China has millions and, a large population. We're going to see, the Bible predicts a huge Asian army in the future. And we're watching for elements that can show where that can come from and how that can be financially supported. We're going to watch just a little bit of this interview. The chief executive of the world's biggest diamond firm, De Beers, says that China will be the engine of growth for the diamond market. Philippe Mellier expects Chinese sales to grow 10% annually over the coming years. Mr. Mellier told the BBC's Juliana Liu that while there's a slowdown from recent years, it is still their fastest growing market.
The rate of growth of diamond jewelry is going to be still very strong, but maybe it could be a little bit lower than what we enjoyed in the last maybe 10 years. I still believe that in the foreseeable future, diamond jewelry sales will be growing at around 10% plus. Maybe not as big as 20%, but 10% is still the biggest growth we can enjoy around the world. China 10 years ago was 3% of the world market. Now it is more than 13, it's around 15% of the world market. So the base is much higher. 10% growth over a much bigger base is the equivalent of 20% when we were a slightly smaller market. So it's still good growth, and we believe China, Greater China, is the engine of growth for the future.
Oh, friends, I'm sorry, I had my microphone off. He ended with a point, I hope you get there. He said that China is the engine of growth for the future. He said, diamond market, other things too. Friends, that's it for our Monday night report here on Nightcast. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again tomorrow night, Tuesday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.